Welcome to Five Live Cricket, the day after England's men won the T20 World Cup final against Pakistan. Delighted to say we have England internationals with us in the shape of Michael Carberry and Stephen Finn. Evening to you both. It was an intriguing final, wasn't it, Michael?
Yeah, it certainly was. I wouldn't say the result was unexpected from my end. I think England have been an outstanding white ball outfit for quite a few years now. As I said, culminated with the 50 over World Cup win in 2019, and they've basically, in my opinion, I think they've dominated white ball cricket for quite a long time. It hasn't necessarily resulted always in getting over the line in finals, but this time they did. And I think overall, the campaign went as well as it could have been.
So are you saying you never doubted during the tournament and never doubted during the final?
No, not really. If you look at England set up as a team, I mean, I think they've basically got so much depth and experience in all facets of the game. Very experienced top order batters in the captain and Alex Hales, middle order that is very experienced and very powerful. And as I said, when you think Adil Rashid, who bats at 11, who's got first class hundreds, it's a pretty deep batting lineup. And then you look at the bowling lineup as well. Mark Wood bowling, as fast as I've seen anybody bowl, mixed in with Chris Wokes, and again, very experienced lineup. Adil Rashid, good, one of the best T20 spinners, and the fielding, as well. So I think as a complete package, you look at the England setup and you say, it's a pretty dominant force.
Stephen, did you ever have any wobbly moments during the tournament or the final?
Maybe a couple. I think when we were waiting to see whether Shaheen Afridi was going to bowl those final 2 overs of his spell, I think I was mildly concerned, I'd have to say. I think I still had confidence in Ben Stokes to see the guys over the line in that situation, and I think, as Michael alluded to, the depth in the batting lineup that England have, it affords them the luxury to be able to put themselves under pressure like that. But as soon as Shaheen Afridi limped off and we had those 5 balls of Iftikhar Ahmed in the final that those 2 batters attacked aggressively and really got England over the line, I was fine after that. But a couple of dodgy moments, I have to say.
I'll come on to the bowlers in a second, because at times this tournament has felt very much like a bowlers tournament, and Sam Curran got both player of the tournament and player of the match in the final. So we'll come on to Sam in just a moment. Stephen, what have you made of the leadership of this England team and how Jos Buttler has led them and captained them?
I think that he's done an outstanding job. I never had any doubts as to whether Jos was the right man to take over from Owen Morgan. He's been Owen Morgan's eyes in the field for the last 6 or 7 years that they've played together, and it was a natural ascendancy for him to take over the captaincy. I suppose the challenge for him was always going to be if he could put his own stamp on the team in time, in those 6 months that he had between taking over and then taking on this T20 World Cup. And I think that he's done it outstandingly. I think that the tournament in Pakistan before that 7-match series, I think that really stood him in good stead in finding out who his go-to guys were under pressure. There are a couple of little hiccups with that, with the injury to Reece Topley, the injury to David Malan and Mark Wood in the build-up to the semi-final and the final. But I think that what we've seen from Jos is calmness under pressure. I think that him being able to be adaptable with the way that he uses his bowlers. We saw Adil Rashid dot all over the place throughout the tournament, and I think that was one of his great strengths, was his ability to be able to experiment with those kinds of things. And I think also a massive part is to be said to him opening the batting and facing the first ball of the innings. He scored 3 fours in the first 6 balls of the innings against India, and that really set the tone. And you look at the way the Indians and the Pakistanis approached the opening 6 overs of their batting innings in both the semi and the final. They looked timid, they looked shy, they looked as though they didn't know what a good score was going to be. But on the flip side, Joss Butler came out and he played with assertiveness, he played with calmness that I think settles the rest of the team's nerves. And I think that that's not something that we've seen in an England shirt from a captain, because we haven't had that many opening batting captains. So he was outstanding, and for all those reasons I just listed, I think that he did a brilliant job.
Yeah, just to jump on the back of Finney there, I would agree with him as well. The flexibility, using Moeen Ali to open the bowling, and saying to Sam Curran at certain times to bowl at different phases of an innings. I thought he used him brilliantly there, and I think he's very quickly growing into the role, and as you say, putting his own identity on this team, alongside his batting, which I thought was outstanding. Certainly the knock he played against India alongside Alex Hales, the pace of the innings, it was just complete destruction.
It's I mean, he is the captain, obviously, Michael. But there is an element, isn't there, as there is in a lot of team sports, of a leadership group, and that may be using Moeen Ali as a sounding board. He's obviously got Ben Stokes in there as the Test captain as well. He's the kind of guy, Joss, who, whilst being the captain, is not afraid to take counsel from others.
Yeah, and I think you have to be open to ideas as a captain. I think, as I say, I think he's in a great position because the guys he's got to lean on are also very experienced. As I said earlier, top of the show, the likes of Ben Stokes, who for me is one of England's most important players through the tournament. Also, let's not forget his efforts as well. I mean, it was an outstanding knock to get England over the line in the final. He can lean on those guys for ideas. I think it's important when there's a lot of harry-carry in the middle of a 2020 game, and minds sometimes can be scrambled. So I think he's in that great position. And as I said, I take my hats off to how he's captained and led the side. I think he's going to be one of England's best captains.
I think you look at good captains as well have to have people in the wings to be able to offer ideas and solutions to problems. I know that I've captained before, and you have to be willing to accept their opinions, but you also have to be strong enough to be able to decipher what are good ideas and what are bad ones. And I think that Joss Butler has done that very well. You can see him consulting all the time. Ben Stokes, Moeen Ali, a lot to try and decipher what is the best move in the game, but ultimately the buck lies with him. And the great skill there is being able to have those guys to lean on, but also understand what you believe is the right thing to happen next. And that's the challenge of a captain. And I think that he's done that very, very well through the tournament as well.
Let's move it on to Sam Curran, player of the tournament, man of the match in the final as well. As a batter, first of all, Michael, and then we'll get the bowler's perspective. But as a batter, what makes Sam Curran so effective? As in, from a batter's perspective, what makes Sam Curran so effective as a bowler?
Well, I think he's a very very much a thinking bowler, and I think he's someone who reads the game very well. He's not the quickest bowlers going around world cricket, so I think he has to use other attributes like accuracy and change of pace, not to get himself lined up. But what I've liked in watching him bowl is, he hasn't tried too much. He's generally hit a good area, and he's bowled smartly to the dimensions of the ground. Think back to, he had the big leg side boundary, and he was happy to use his shorter ball at times to force batsmen to hit that side, and that's good bowling. A smart cricketer, which as I say, when there's a lot going on in a 2020 game, you need those kind of characters. And he's someone like Joss Butler as well. He's someone that appears to be, again, very calm under pressure, and I think he's someone who would have benefited from, the belief that Joss Butler would have given him, certainly from that Pakistan series, where he gave him that responsibility to come in and bowl in those death overs, and he did it very, very well. And I think he's just basically carried that forward into this tournament, and ended up, player of the tournament.
And actually, Stephen, that's the thing. The first thing, isn't it? That, as Michael says, he is Joss's go-to death bowler now.
Yeah, well, I think that England for a little while had been looking for that person that wants the responsibility, and Chris Jordan's done an amazing job at the death for England for a number of years. But I think that left arm angle of Sam Curran just gives him that little bit extra and something a little bit different that batters aren't used to facing at that stage of the innings. And I think he seems like the sort of guy who wants to be in those high pressure situations, and I think that as a bowler that's a very important attitude to have, because it means that you commit to what you're doing and you commit to your plan. As Carb said there, he's not the quickest bowler, he doesn't have that X factor pace, but what he does have is an ability to commit to what he's doing. And when he bowls his bouncer, he bowls it as hard as he possibly can. When he tries to bowl a Yorker, he bowls that as hard as he possibly can, which, trust me, as a bowler, is a very difficult skill to do at the death when you know that people are trying to whack you. You team that up with the intelligence and the communication that he has and Joss Buttler have between them, and the ability to execute what he wants to do. It makes him a pretty dangerous proposition at the death.
Shan Masood was one of Curran's wickets in the final. He actually made 38 from 28 balls, did Masood. There are a couple of quotes here that I find really interesting from him. Michael, the first one on Curran, Shan Masood said he just doesn't go to one particular predictable length. He can bowl a good Yorker. He's got a decent bumper. He bowls his cutters, and then even his length ball is a heavy ball. And this is the bit that I like. When you see his stature, you want to take him on. But he is that class bowler, and I think in this tournament he's been a class apart. I love that batter psychology of seeing the stature of somebody and thinking, yeah, I can go after him.
Yeah, well, this is what we said. You look at Sam Curran. He's not the tallest of fast bowlers going around. He's certainly not the quickest fast bowler going around. But I think he uses the attributes he has very, very well. He's probably someone a little bit skiddier than you think. He's a little bit, slingy, left arm as well. So, sometimes his bumper looks as though it's a little bit more difficult to pick up than most. And as batsmen in the game, we look for those little clues when the bumpers come in, when the short balls come in. So someone who's a little bit slingy, I always found, was sometimes a little bit harder to pick up at times. But yeah, I think Shan Masood summed it up perfectly, really. He bowls to his plan. He bowls a good Yorker. He commits to what he's doing as well. He seems to be very, very clear when he runs in as to what he's trying to do. And as I said before, it was smart bowling. He's someone who identified the size of the ground, the dimensions, where the big boundaries are, where he wants to be hit, and he committed to the plan. And I think that was very, very high skilled and high thought out bowling.
Yeah, I think, and also you look at the fact that he is a batter and he's able to slog them out the park at the end of the innings as well. I think that gives him a little bit of one-upmanship, because he understands where he would want to hit the ball and what he would want someone to bowl in that scenario, which when you can't hold a bat like myself, you don't have that advantage of being able to understand what a batter would want to do. So
don't be modest, Vinny. Don't be modest.
Maybe once in a while someone gets unlucky and I whack it, but no, I think that gives him a little bit of an advantage in those situations as well, because he does intrinsically understand what someone's looking for. And as Michael said, he intelligently bowled to the dimensions of the ground, which is such an important thing in Australia.
One of the other things Michael mentioned, and Shan Masood mentioned it as well, is how clever Curran is at watching the batter until very, very late. How difficult a skill is that, Steve? And how much can you develop that skill over the years when you've got so much going on when bowling an over in white ball cricket?
I think a lot of it relies on you being in good rhythm and trusting what you're doing. I think I've gone through phases in my career where you feel super confident in what you're doing, and you just trust that your natural instinct will allow you to make the right decision. So you go through those scenarios in practice, you go through them and you say to a batter, right, in the practice session, this is my last 6 balls of an innings. I want you to move around and dart around the crease, and I'm just going to follow you. And you put yourself in that scenario so that when you come to doing that in the middle, it's almost second nature. And if you're in good rhythm and you're trusting yourself, then in the middle, you just let those natural instincts take over. Whereas when you're just holding back off it a little bit, you're trying to put it there, you're just trying to search for your Yorker, and you're not nailing it in practice, that's when you come to second guess yourself and doubt yourself in the middle. So he looked in great rhythm. His head was level and his eyes were level when he was running in, and that allows you to watch the batter. And he executed almost everything that he wanted to do.
The bigger picture of England at this World Cup, what are the 3 things for you both that are the reasons why they've managed to win the T20? Stephen, you go first.
I will go first. I think first and foremost, I think that them actually losing to Ireland helped them out in the World Cup. I think that it refocused them. It realigned them to make every match after that pretty much a knockout match, and I think that stood them in good stead when it came to the real knockout matches. It meant that they'd performed under that pressure, and they'd had that little wobble in the tournament to really focus their minds on what they wanted to do. And I think also going hand in hand with that, the second thing that I would say would be the fact that they had that 7-match series in Pakistan before the tournament. I think that allowed them to find their combinations. It allowed Alex Hales to be reintegrated into the team to form that great partnership with Josh Buttler. It allowed them to find Sam Curran as their death bowling option, and the guy most flexible in the bowling unit to be able to fulfill many different roles. And it allowed Harry Brook to really cement himself in the team. I know he didn't do too much in the tournament, but I think that he bodes really well for him in the future to be able to be a big player.
And that series, as you say, it really allowed them to fiddle about a bit, didn't it, with their options? And at times it didn't look like they really knew what their batting order was going to be, and maybe that was down to circumstances, conditions, or just trying different things out. The other thing the 7-match series did was it allowed players a bit of a run. I mean, they got 2, 3, 4, 5 games of a 7-match series, as opposed to, the final one of a 3-match series.
Yep, certainly, and that allowed Mark Wood and Chris Wokes to come back from injury after playing very little cricket through the summer. It allowed those guys to reintegrate themselves into the squad from a bowling perspective, to put themselves under pressure in match situations, and I think that did them really well when it came to the World Cup. They were 2 of England's outstanding performers, and the fact that they hadn't played much cricket for the 12 months previously never really came into the conversation because they were in such good rhythm. And then I think the last thing that England did really well in this World Cup that allowed them to win it, I think that they had such clarity in their decision making when it came to selection. They had David Malan and Mark Wood, who'd been really important cogs in that T20 team in the build-up to the semi-final. They'd have had a decision to make whether they play those important cogs either 60, 70% fit and hope that they don't break down or they don't do the job. And we saw how much that hurt Pakistan actually in the final with Shaheen going down. It leaves your bowling option short. So to have the clarity to say, no, we trust the guys that are coming in, we trust the understudies, we trust Chris Jordan and Phil Salt to come in and fulfil those roles. And I think that confidence really allowed England to let themselves free and to win that final quite comfortably. What
are your 3, Michael?
Yeah, I think Finney touched on one point that I made. I agree with as well. Was that sort of next man up mentality? So Mark Wood, who goes down sadly, in comes Chris Jordan and slots in straight away, and the belief and confidence that Josh Buttler gives and the hierarchy give those guys coming in. I think went large parts towards the successful campaign. one point I made earlier, again, I think I look at England as a squad, and I just think in terms of balance of team, I just think, you look down that lineup, now these guys have, they played a lot of cricket at T20 level, both domestically for England and in franchise. And, I think it's nice going into a tournament where you look, probably Harry Brook aside, but you look down the list and there's a lot of games, there's a lot of experience now of these guys have gained over the years. So I think again that stands you in good stead. And I sort of picked out a sort of individual performance, which I think was Stokes. Really, I think the way Stokes played in the final, I think was a very intelligent knock in a high pressure situation. I think he's done it time and time again. And I think
it was almost understated, wasn't it, Michael?
Yes, yeah, and I expect that to some degree, because the modern cricket fan now likes to see the ball disappear into the crowd, and it's all about trying to win the game now. With 2 or 3 overs to spare, but I'm still that old dinosaur. I prefer, I like those tough knocks under pressure. He did it magnificently against, I think, Sri Lanka as well, which it was a similar kind of game, wasn't it? It could have gone, either way, and Stokesy was there to see England over the line, and he just batted with good common sense. He just didn't panic, helped out by Shaheen Afridi going down injured, sadly. But unfortunately, you have to capitalise on those opportunities, and again, just being the man there at the end to see it through and see England home. I think, he's, again, as I said time and time again, he's a very important cog to England.
I like the point you make about the number of games of T20 cricket that the England players have now got in them, probably, as you say, with the exception of Harry Brook. And when you look at that, you're talking about IPL or Big Bash or Pakistan Super League as well. I know India won their group, and I know India got to the semi-finals. But that semi-final against England, it looked like they were playing a different brand of cricket, to be honest with you, didn't it? Do you think the BCCI will be looking at not allowing the Indian players to play elsewhere other than the IPL?
No. I mean, it was an interesting game, really. I mean, I think Finney said before, I mean, they look very timid, which is very un-India-like. But I think, through the tournament, if you look at, I mean, there was something missing with India all round, I felt. The top order of Rohit and KL Rahul never really got going, did they? It was all pretty much Kohli, who I thought, again, deserves a shout out as well. He was magnificent through the tournament. And then it was always it always felt like it was down to sort of that middle order, Pandya, to come and, get them to a score. I was impressed with their bowlers, other than semi-final, but when they met the England side in the semi-final, I mean, it just, from start to finish, you felt, it just never really clicked. And then with the ball, I think that's as poor as I've seen India bowl for a long time. It just never, I mean, it was very floaty, very friendly sort of first over. It's the kind of over I would love in county cricket when I was still playing. The 2 punches through the covers and the leg side clip ball. I mean, that's just what you want when you're chasing down a score. It just seemed, whether they were missing Bumrah. I mean, obviously, look, he's a massive weapon for them, and would it have made any difference? But something just seemed missing with them. I found it through this tournament throughout, and I think, as I said, I think that it was the right result. Really, I think England were outstanding in that game.
Yeah, I would probably agree with Michael, Stephen, that they won't. Maybe I should ask whether they should.
I think there's definitely merit in allowing your players to go and play in different conditions. I think that that's such an important part of your development as a cricketer, is being able to get out there and experience different climates, different environments, different dimensions of grounds. Like, those Indian guys would not have experienced boundaries outside of international games or World Cups. They wouldn't have experienced boundaries that big. A lot of the shots that they would have been playing would have been disappearing miles over the ropes, and instead they're getting caught 15 yards in. So yeah, I think it makes a massive difference to as I said, your development. I think when I was younger and playing in the England team that played in the 2012 World Cup and the 2015 50 over World Cup, this was before we were really allowed to go and play the IPL. You'd put your notice into the ECB every year saying I'd like to go and play in the IPL, and you'd get an email back about 25 seconds later saying no, you're not, mate, you're playing against Derby on the 4th of April actually. So, and I think that allowing the players that flexibility to be able to go away and experience those conditions. Yes, they get criticised a lot because they miss domestic cricket and they go and they get paid a lot of money. But I think days like yesterday and that T20 World Cup final and the dominance that they've showed over such good teams that we used to get dominated by, I think that is one of the very big foundations towards us being able to do that.
Really interesting thoughts, and now we have an ODI series that starts on Thursday against Australia. I mean, give me strength. Give me strength. Surely they can have a week off.
I know, isn't it a shambles? I think even Moeen Ali said today it's just a complete and utter joke. We won a T20 World Cup. We played in a really draining, exhausting final, and then 72 hours later you're rocking up for an ODI that the more cynical of us out there might think that it's just for the pound signs.
No, really, Stephen? Surely not. Let's end it there. Forget the money and reflect on the glory. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you, Stephen.